All right, so you sent over a bunch of articles about this snowstorm that might be headed for South Jersey.
Mm.
And I know you want to get right to the point, especially with the potential for some messy commutes Tuesday evening and into Wednesday morning.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like winter's not quite done with us yet.
So tell me what we're looking at here. When is this thing supposed to hit, and how long is it going to stick around?
Well, the latest forecasts are showing that the snow should start sometime Tuesday afternoon, and it could last all the way into Wednesday afternoon.
So both the evening and the morning commute could be impacted. And how much snow are we talking about here?
Well, that all depends on where exactly you are, but South Jersey could see 4 to 6 inches. Some areas might even get up to 8 inches.
Wow, that's a lot more than what they're saying for other parts of the state.
Right.
Some of the articles mentioned just 1 to 4 inches for the central part of the state.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, the snowfall rate in South Jersey could be over an inch an hour.
So South Jersey is definitely going to be hit the hardest with this one. So which counties are actually under this winter storm watch?
Let's see, we've got Atlantic, Burlington, Camden, Cape May, Cumberland, Gloucester Ocean, and Salem counties.
So if you're in any of those counties, you definitely want to start preparing now. So
Mhm.
we've got the when and the where. But what does this all actually mean for people living in those areas? What should our listener be most concerned about?
Well, given the timing of this thing and how much snow we could get, the biggest concern is definitely going to be travel disruptions, especially during those peak commute times. Tuesday evening and Wednesday morning commutes could be really difficult.
Yeah, heavy snow plus rush hour traffic. That's never a good combination.
Yeah.
And wait, you mentioned something about another storm hitting later this week, too.
That's right. And this one could be even worse because it's looking like we could get a mix of snow, freezing rain, and ice.
Oh, that sounds like a recipe for disaster. So I'm curious, why is South Jersey getting hit so hard with this? I remember we talked about another storm recently that hit areas north and east of New Jersey. What's causing this shift southward?
That's a great question. The way this current weather pattern is setting up, it tends to push these big storms south. Basically, there's a dip in the jet stream that's funneling all these storms towards the South Jersey region.
So it's almost like whatever one area gains in clear skies, another one loses to intense weather.
Exactly. It's like a seesaw effect.
So it's not just random chance that South Jersey is getting hit this time around. It's all part of a bigger meteorological picture.
Precisely. Yeah, it's all about these large-scale weather patterns and, how they affect everything down here on the ground.
So this isn't just bad luck for South Jersey. It's all because of this larger weather pattern.
Exactly.
Mm.
Now, let's talk a bit more about that winter storm watch that we mentioned earlier. I know we talked about which counties it covers, but what does that actually mean for our listener? What should they be doing right now to prepare?
Yeah, I think that's an important point. It's easy to hear winter storm watch and not really understand how serious it could be.
Yeah, for sure. A winter storm watch just means that conditions are looking good for a big winter storm. And in this case, we're talking about a lot of snow and maybe even some travel disruptions. So if you live in one of those counties, now is the time to get ready.
So what should our listener be doing besides, stocking up on snacks and finding something to watch on TV? What specific steps should they take?
Well, the first thing is to just stay informed. Keep checking the latest forecasts and any updates from the National Weather Service. Things can change pretty quickly, so it's important to stay up to date.
Especially with that second storm possibly coming later in the week.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to actually preparing, think about your travel plans. If you can avoid driving during those peak snowfall times, you should. And if you have to drive, make sure your car is ready for winter weather. Make sure you've got a full tank of gas, check your tire pressure, and pack an emergency kit.
What should people have in their emergency kit? Seems like a lot of people forget about that.
You're right about that. It's one of those things that you hope you never need, but you definitely want to have it just in case. You should have warm clothes, blankets, a flashlight with extra batteries, a first aid kit, non-perishable food and water. Oh, and of course, make sure your phone's charged in case you need to call for help.
Those are some really good reminders. And you mentioned earlier that the snowfall rate could get pretty high, over an inch an hour in some areas. What does that really mean in terms of what people can expect?
Well, a high snowfall rate like that means that the roads can get really bad really quickly and it can get hard to see. Imagine driving in a blizzard where the snow is coming down so hard that you can barely see the car in front of you. It can get pretty dangerous, which is why it's so important to stay off the roads if you can.
So we've covered when this storm is supposed to hit, how much snow we could get, the potential for travel problems, and how to stay informed and prepared.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about that second storm you mentioned. It sounds like that one could be a real mess with the mix of snow, freezing rain, and ice.
Yeah, You're right about that. That second storm is one we need to keep an eye on. That mix of snow, freezing rain, and ice could make things really dangerous out there. It's also going to make it tough for the forecasters.
How so?
Well, it can be really hard to predict where that line between snow, freezing rain, and sleet is going to fall. A tiny change in temperature can make a huge difference in what kind of precipitation we see on the ground. And that can mean the difference between being able to drive safely and, potentially losing power.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like the really delicate balance between those different types of precipitation. You mentioned power outages, too. Why should our listener be worried about that, especially with this second storm?
Well, heavy wet snow can build up on power lines and cause them to snap or sag. And if you add in freezing rain and ice, it just puts that much more weight and stress on the lines, which means that power outages are going to be more likely.
So it's not just the snow itself. It's all that weight from the different kinds of precipitation. What can people do to prepare for a power outage?
The most important thing is to have a plan. Make sure you've got flashlights and extra batteries ready to go. You might also want to think about getting a portable generator if you need electricity for medical equipment or other important things. And don't forget about staying warm. Make sure you've got extra blankets, warm clothes, and even some food that you don't have to cook.
That's all really good advice. We've talked about a lot today, the impact of this first storm, the possibility of a second storm later in the week. And it seems like the big takeaway here is to be proactive and not reactive.
That's exactly right. It's not about just dealing with each storm as it comes, but about getting ready for these events and understanding the risks.
So it's almost like we need to change how we think about winter weather.
That's a really good way to put it, and I think you're absolutely right. We can't just hope for the best and then deal with whatever happens. We need to be proactive, informed, and prepared.
And being prepared also means understanding why these weather patterns are happening. You talked earlier about how this current pattern is pushing storms south. Can you explain that a little more?
Sure, it all starts with the jet stream, which is this really fast air current that circles the globe. Where the jet stream is and how strong it is plays a big role in moving weather systems around. In this case, there's a dip in the jet stream, which is creating a path for these storms to move south.
So it's like a river in the sky guiding these storms towards South Jersey.
That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
And it gets even more complicated when you consider things like La Nina and El Nino. Those patterns can change where the jet stream is and affect how many storms we get and how strong they are.
So it's like all these different things are working together, the jet stream, these global climate patterns, and they're all combining to create the weather we experience here on the ground.
Exactly. And understanding those factors can help us be more prepared for whatever Mother Nature might throw at us.
That's a really good point. So for our listener who might be feeling a little overwhelmed with all this information, what are the most important things to remember?
Well, first, you need to know if you're in one of the counties that's under the winter storm watch. Then stay up to date on the latest forecasts and be ready for a lot of snow, especially during those busy commute times. If you can avoid traveling during those times, that's the best thing to do.
And we also need to think about getting ready for winter weather in general, not just this one storm.
You got it. This isn't just about one storm. It's about being prepared for the long haul. Think about what you can do to be better prepared for future winter weather events. Maybe you need to make a plan for power outages, stock up on supplies, or even make sure your house is well insulated.
It's all about being proactive and taking steps now to make sure you're ready for future storms.
Exactly. And there are a lot of resources out there to help you do that. The National Weather Service website is a great place to start. They have tons of information on staying safe during winter weather and how to prepare.
That's a good tip. So as we're wrapping up this look at the South Jersey snowstorm and talking about how to be prepared for winter weather, I'm thinking about what steps can individuals and communities take to be more prepared for these really intense winter weather events. It's something we should probably all be thinking about.
It really is a critical question, and it's something that's going to take a lot of different approaches. I mean, on a personal level, we talked about some of the basics like having that emergency kit, making sure your car's ready for winter, and having a plan in case the power goes out.
Right. But what about going beyond that? What can communities do to get ready for these storms?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. We're seeing a lot of towns and cities doing things ahead of time to try to lessen the impact of winter weather. For instance, some cities are burying power lines so they're less likely to go down in a storm. Other places are setting up really good snow removal plans and making sure they can communicate with residents during emergencies.
So it's about combining those personal steps with things that communities can do as a whole.
Exactly. And we also have to remember that climate change is probably going to make these winter storms even worse in the future. As temperatures go up and down and precipitation patterns change, we're probably going to see more intense snowstorms, more freezing rain, and even those flash freezes. So we really need to adapt to this new reality.
It's not just about waiting for the storm to hit and then dealing with it. It's about being ready for a future where these storms might be more frequent and more intense.
That's right. It's about creating a culture of preparedness, both for ourselves and for our communities. And that means everything from learning about the risks to supporting policies that focus on making our communities more resilient.
So it's not just about having extra batteries and blankets. It's about having a larger conversation about how we can adapt to a changing climate and create communities that can handle these challenges.
Exactly. And that conversation needs to include everyone, from the people making decisions in government to city planners to just regular people.
It's something we all have to work on together, and it's something we can't afford to ignore.
I completely agree. The good news is there are already resources out there to help people and communities get started. Organizations like the Red Cross and FEMA offer really helpful advice on making emergency plans and getting ready for these kinds of events.
That's a really good reminder. So as we finish up this deep dive into the South Jersey snowstorm and how to be prepared for winter weather, I want to leave our listener with one last thought.
Go ahead.
Don't wait until the storm is here to start thinking about how to get ready. Do it now. Whether it's putting together your emergency kit, checking the insulation in your house, or just learning about the risks at the time to get prepared, is now before the snow starts.
I couldn't have said it better myself. A little preparation can go a long way in keeping you safe and healthy during these winter storms.
Well, on that note, it's time for us to wrap up. Thanks for joining us for this snowy deep dive. Stay safe and warm out there, everyone.